Okay.
Hi everyone.
We'll start properly. Hi, Joanna. This is Tony Prescott. I'm talking to Joanna Bryson for the Mirror Maze live stream as part of the UK Robotics and Autonomous Systems Festival Robotics Week. So, Joanna, just tell us a bit about yourself and why you're interested in robotics and what you do now.
Well, I guess I'm interested in robotics because I'm a geek. My first love was trying to understand actually animal intelligence. I wanted to be like Jane Goodall and go out and understand how other animals were thinking. But then I was a good programmer, and so I wound up sort of playing a safety. I undergraduate at University of Chicago in behavioral science, so much what I wanted to do, and I'm very glad now I have a liberal arts degree. But then I went to Edinburgh and got a degree in AI. And the reason was because I thought it was a combination of what I was good at mixed with what I wanted to be. And so I was originally getting my graduate degrees in AI with the intention of going back into psychology and animal behavior because I thought it was a good way to do science through modeling. But in fact, I wound up with a PhD from MIT in computer science, and also my first postdoc, the undergraduates couldn't use my software. Even it was at Harvard, they were super smart undergraduates, and it was still hopeless. I thought, oh, I got to go back and do some more HCI or something to make my systems more usable. And then I was kind of wedged for, I guess, 17 years. I was stuck in computer science. I'd never been in one discipline for so long. And then, but somewhere around 2010, I got invited by well, I don't know who actually, but somehow I wound up in the EPSRC, AHRC robot ethics retreat. And I had already been working in robots. So when I was in Edinburgh, I was originally interested in music, but I realized that mostly flaky people were in music then, and all the cool people were in robotics. I mean, if you can really demonstrate it, and we very much all believed, I think we were part of the same religion at that time, that you weren't going to get intelligence if you didn't have a similar experience of reality, and so that robots are a path through that. I still kind of believe that. I still believe that you're not going to get something exactly like human-like intelligence without human-like experience, but I no longer think that robots are that much closer to human-like experience than other computers. But anyway, that was why I got into robots was actually through Edinburgh and through their Lego robot thing. So my PhD was in systems engineering of real-time AI systems for robots. I was originally on a big robot project, but also for game AI, intelligent homes, those kinds of things. But then I went back into using that for scientific simulations. But my PhD students and some of my PhD students and most of my master students continued using it originally in AI, games AI, because games don't fall over as much. But now we do have a little bit of stuff going on in robotics. So Rob Wortham, in particular, brought robots back into my group, but there was a bit. Katerina Nevikova and Sven Gaudel did some work with robots too. Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. So Daniel's joining us as well. So Joanna, so you said that robots aren't any closer to humans than AIs. Can you explain that?
I would never in a million years say AIs. So artificial intelligence is a discipline. It's a set of programming techniques. But what I mean is that when you think about all the qualia involved in being a human or a cow or a rat or even a fruit fly, there are so many things that we share about how we represent information chemically and genetically, and the hairs, the sensing, the sound, the vibrations, all that stuff. And with robots, I mean, yes, we do explore the same sort of three-dimensional physical problems with them. So to that extent, it's similar. But on the other hand, the paper we had in Science in 2017 showed that with natural language processing, you wind up exploring a very similar semantic space. So I'm no longer sure that if you have some bump sensors and some sonar, that you're now, and even though you're in a three-dimensional space, you have to figure out that your experience is anywhere as much like a human's as say an Alexa that's sitting there having to deal with language. because so much of our experience is encoded in our culture. So you can absorb quite a lot of information, like that insects are icky, and that that unfortunately African Americans' lives are not as good as European Americans, at least in the United States.
But let's go back to, you mentioned flies, because surely fly intelligence is an easier target for robotics. And
I really thought, I thought that we'd already had insects. So I went and did a PhD at MIT. We were trying to build a 2-year-old child. And I thought we had insect intelligence down, and that was sort of the next, I don't know if a child was the next thing. But honestly, and I know you wrote a brilliant paper for this meeting about iguanas. But honestly, the intelligence that's in Genghis is like, you can find that in single cell organisms, right? It's like,
yeah, but the single cell organisms are pretty smart. So
well, they are, yeah.
A lot of biological intelligence is already there in the cell. But couldn't we just take the bits of biology that you need and put them into a robot and have biohybrids? I mean, if it's stuff that's happening at the inside the cell at the sort of DNA level, we could build that. We can build cellular computers, like, can't we? So
yeah, okay. So computational equivalent stuff to what DNA is doing for intelligence, yeah, maybe. But I thought we were talking more about like sort of qualia and motivation and stuff like that. That's
they're all a bit intangible. I think I like to go with stuff.
No, they're not at all intangible. What are you talking about? Like motivational systems. Again, I learned a lot of what I learned about it from some of your earlier papers about.
But you can't measure qualia in a fly. You just can.
No. I'm just demonstrating I'm not afraid of those words. but the point is that I use them for as an approximation of the phenomenological experience, which correlates with what the subset of all the context information that you're able to describe, or that you have conscious access to. That's what I'm calling qualia.
Yeah,
and so the point is that, like, what are you explicitly getting in? How is that information being represented? And at some level of abstraction, I mean, part of what consciousness is doing, right? The hippocampal stuff is it's so abstracted that you might say, oh, that is kind of like like what a computer has to play around with, but not very. There's a heck of a lot of cells in the basal forebrain, and I can't believe it's great to be able to talk to roboticists about this. Because I mean, meaning that your group at Sheffield is fantastic. We're having the neuroscience and the robotics there too. But there's not a lot of people here I can talk about either neuroscience or robots too, so it's kind of fun.
Well,
did you introduce where I'm from? I'm currently now I'm a professor of ethics and technology at the Hertie School of Governance, because I wound up somewhere along the line being able to combine what I knew about the theoretical biology of adding a lot of information and communication and how that alters cooperative behavior. That got kind of the stream between that part of my research, which is core to understand what cognition is even for and why you have an individual species, individuals rather than across, like we were talking about single cell organisms. That stream crossed with that I'd written a few ethics papers back in the 90s, because I noticed people over-identifying with AI if it happens to be shaped like a person, but not otherwise.
Yeah, I think you're known for this perspective that we have to treat robots as robots and not think of them as surrogate animals. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, I don't like to say how you have to treat. I mean, so how someone's going to do what people want to do in their own house is their own business. But I don't like experts misrepresenting or even commercial entities exploiting the needs and desires of people in a dishonest way.
I was going to suggest maybe that was a good point to switch from the more cognitive and robotics talk to more the ethics stuff, I know, which you do a lot of. So you mentioned early on that you were on that EPSRC panel that convened in 2010. Yeah. That seems like a long time ago now. I think I first met you soon after that, and it seemed, I think we talked about stuff and we were on revised it a few years after that and things and looked at it again.
That was hysterical. Yeah, no. So that was so it wasn't just a panel. It was like a 3-day retreat, and it was tons of people. They brought out, I don't know, there was like 30, 40 people. There were people from the military there. There was people from, like I said, industry, at least 2 research councils, and then a ton of academics. But anyway, then it took us a year to get them to publish the Principles of Robotics online. So they were published in 2011. And so then you guys organized something for the 5th anniversary where you were trying to get us to revise them. And then the audience voted against all the revisions. I think there was maybe one that Noel Sharkey hammered through a slight revision of one part. But basically, when we laid out, we had a bunch of people who came that were original authors. And I was very impressed. The audience was the audience was, it was AISP. They're relatively informed, but not about necessarily ethics or robots, and they got it. So I
remember reading the original principles and thinking, yeah, this is really good. I remember probably strenuously attacking a few of them when we met 5 years later. But I have a very fond memories of that. What I liked about all of that is the ambition. And I'm wondering, is it maybe time again? I mean, do you imagine that this is something we need to keep doing every 5 years? Or are you kind of hoping now that, okay, can we put this to bed for maybe 20 years and then see what happens? Or?
Well, you guys, so then what happened? After 2011 and after 2016, in fact, right about 2016. So 2016, 2017, the OECD started inviting me to these meetings they're having about AI policy transnationally. And and then at some point, the person in charge of that, Karina, what was her name? I can't remember it. I'm terrible with names. I'll get back to it. But anyway, so she asked, do you remember Karina? Anyway, she's still very, very senior. And in fact, I just saw her a couple days ago. And anyway, so the OECD was putting together, they had a 5-year project. I'm not claiming I was a major part of it. They brought me to 2 of the working shops, but she also asked me to write a white paper. So I wound up writing a 32-page white paper for them. And then they produced something 2 years after that called the AI, the AI principles, the OECD AI principles, which are strikingly similar to the British Principles of Robotics, although not identical. And there's some really important and interesting extensions, and there's one omission, which we'll come back to if you want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, then but their process, even though I say this about 52 pages or 42, whatever it was, 32 pages and strikingly similar. Nevertheless, they went through a process where they had 2 people from every OECD country working for a year on these things. And then they produced a document. It also has, like, similar to the original Principles of Robotics. It's not really just the principles. There's this long document with explanations and other things, right? So the 2 documents are actually quite similar too in some ways. But anyway, those 2 people that were in the room for that year fighting, they all tend to feel that they have very strong ownership if they wrote it. So even though I know the OECD must have facilitated that process, they came up with something that the countries felt real ownership on. So now, not only the OECD, but also the G20 and a few other people have signed up to those principles. And so now I'm in something called the Global Partnership for AI, which was sort of coordinated by France and Canada. It sort of came out of the G7. Our remit is that we have to do things that match the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and the OECD's AI principles. So I do think that eventually they should be re-examined, but at this stage, I think that we should consolidate around what the AI, like I said, they were updated. There were some very important extensions and one interesting revision omission that the OECD did. But I feel like 50, mostly elected national governments, what we need to do now, this is how policy works. You need to stabilize and now construct within that structure. So we're working very hard now on things like trying to figure out how to make the digital sectors behave in an accountable way, looking at the assaults on democracy. Those are the kinds of things we're working on now. We're not revising the OECD principles, probably not for another 10 years.
Okay.
But I would say that the British principles got revised, and I do that as a talk. In fact, if you want, I could probably screen share. I have slides that highlight the differences between the 2.
All right.
We've only got a short amount of time, so
okay.
maybe another time.
Slides, yeah.
But
I'm enjoying these talks, so we have to maybe get back sometime and do more in depth. Go on,
Oh, yeah,
Phil.
you guys
So
should.
I wanted to ask you, Joanna, because you had a brief spell as a member of the Google oversight board. So can you tell us anything about that? I mean,
Yeah. I mean, I could tell you all kinds of things about that. I actually now have my most recent talk, and again, you can the people at home, if you're finding me more interesting than Mira, you can Google. There's a video of me talking about this under the title "Limits of Transparency," but it was astounding, you know. So for those who don't know, Google was worried about, you know, everybody. So they literally thought of themselves as the good guys, and then they thought everybody thinks we're bad, and so they wanted to put together an external advisory council. And I think they really were looking to have people from across a very broad. In fact, knowing the people I knew, I asked at some point, they admitted that they chose like annoying, talkative people that would definitely say what they were thinking, but that did also seem to update. So that they thought that they wanted to take a broad political spectrum, but put people together, and they say, if these 6 people can get in a room and agree to something, then that means something. And then I think they were going to throw like a lot of their hard problems over the wall to us. So their first thing was face recognition, but just looking at the membership of the committee, I think they were going to get to democracy and election hacking and things like that. So and who knows what else. There was 4 meetings planned, but it got shut down by like a Twitter storm. Which is nuts. And I saw, you know, I was there. So the funny thing was that I had to write a proposal the week that they finally announced it. It took them a long time to announce it. So I had signed it like the previous year. People were like, oh, this is just this, you know, no, they had been working on it for years, and I had signed a contract in like December or November or something. But anyway, they finally announced it in like May or something. I don't remember exactly. And maybe it was April. But anyway, I both was trying to write my case for promotion at University of Bath. And then the British had released some like, you know, grant thing for like with 5-week deadline. And Bath said, you have to apply for this. I said, I'm never going to get that. There's only enough funding for like 3 people, and I'm not going to be one. They're like, you have to apply for this. And I'm like, it's the same time as the promotion. They're like, you have to. So anyway, I was writing a promotion and a grant that week, working really late every night. And then around 11 o'clock, I would get on Twitter and see the 5,000 mentions I had while people were having this storm about this thing, right? But I can tell you from when they first announced it, there was people looking to tear it apart. They did not want Google to succeed at doing something that looked good. And then they eventually mostly laid into the woman well, there was 2 women actually that were on the right, but mostly on the one who was the woman of color, who was the head of the American Heritage Society. Now, I'm not on the right. I'm not anti-abortion, you know. I think anyone who wants to go into a bathroom, I don't care. but unless someone shows me data that really shows that there's any danger there, I just don't see it. But having said that, you know, the beliefs that she was said to represent, something like 30 or 40% of Americans had them. It wasn't like terrorist beliefs. And yet this was used to shut the whole thing down. And I was just astounded. I was like, here is the company that I would say is the world leader in, like, you know, in communication, in artificial intelligence, and they can't even communicate internally. They were having internal riots as well as these external riots.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it sounds like Google could have ridden out the storm and set this thing up. I mean,
no, to be honest, I think there was a couple things that they did wrong, and part of it just involved like one of the really key people being in Australia. So I saw the Twitter storm calming down, and I thought, oh well, thank God. I even told my partner like, oh, thank God that's over. And then that somebody gets off a plane and shuts it all down. And I think it was badly managed. But
well, I mean, it kind of, from the point of view of the critics, they thought it was an exercise in ethics washing, and it kind of revealed itself a bit to be that, because as soon as Google saw it generating bad publicity, they decided maybe it's not such a great idea.
I don't think that's what's going on. I think they were protecting someone. So I think someone that was key to what they saw as a necessary process was pulling off the committee, and so then the committee no longer had efficacy for them. So right. I think someone, I don't know who it was, but maybe someone said they were getting death threats or something, because they were terribly worried about me. And I was just like, you know, I've been bullied since I was at grade school. I was just like, oh yeah, some people said bad things about me on Twitter. I muted them. You know what? Okay. To me, it's not a big deal. But some people were really upset, and they were very, very concerned about my well-being. Given, and I was just like, no, I'm really angry because I just like blew like a week of like late nights fighting about this thing. And also, I was, you know, I had other concerns about it. I knew that people would think it was ethics washing, but I'm seeing this as diplomacy. You know, there was a chance I would have been in the room with other people that were influential, including the heads of Google, and you know, ideas would have been exchanged. This is like saying, oh, you know, America should never talk to Russia. You know, the British should never talk to China. You know, okay. you can definitely point at these things, but it's only through communication that we solve problems.
So if you were in a room with the directors of Google, what would you want to tell them? Number one thing.
I wanted to know. I wanted to find out what it was they wanted to know. If I could convince them of something, then the main thing I want to convince them of is that they need to be coordinating with governments better. And Microsoft kind of knows this already, but that they need to be, you know, worrying about how to pay taxes appropriately. And I know they kind of are, but right. But convincing them that government is something that can happen. But I think they already knew that. I think that's why they had those people in the room, and that's why I'm really cheesed off that a lot of people screwed it up and didn't find a way to help them. I think they were looking to come in from the cold, to be honest.
So, Joanna, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to ask you a question about another controversial topic. So you say that AI is miles from human intelligence, but what about raw artificial intelligence? Sort of the possibility of some kind of super intelligence that isn't human-like, but is AI-like. Do you think that's possible? And what's the sort of timeline on what it could happen, which it could happen?
Well, I'm one of the people that thinks we've had super intelligence. Well, first of all, I think that all the stuff Bostrom talks about is a good description of humanity, and the unintended side effects are the sustainability crisis. So since not since language, but since writing, the advent of writing, that's when we get exponential increase in the number of apes on the planet, and we're at a crisis of that right now. So that's how I feel about that particular singularity. But in terms of you know, AI that exceeds human capacities, again, we have that all over the place. All these books remember things better than I do. Google knows infinitely more stuff than I have. And I think that this obsession with when will it be sufficiently human-like that we'll feel bad or something, I don't, you know, it's the wrong set of targets.
Well, I think the question is, when will it take over? And because we're still in control, aren't we? Or we lost control.
Yeah, no, this again depends how you consider. So better philosophers than me, like Pettit and List, have said in actually in about 2011, 2012, I forget which, that you can think of corporations and governments as AI, right? So there are artifacts that we've constructed. No one actually understands exactly how they work. No one has a complete, you know, it doesn't, you know, you could say like, oh, you know, Trump's in charge or something. No, you know, no one person actually understands everything that's going on. And then these systems, as I said, what we're currently doing is really trashing the planet in an unsustainable way. Now, I still believe, that's part of the reason I came to governance school, that we may be able to figure out how to write. In fact, I'm sure something will shake out. I expect there'll still be primates when we're done. But I'd like to smooth it out so that we have as much biodiversity. I'm a bit worried about Insectageddon, in which case, like, maybe we won't have animals. But mostly, I think that I'm trying to smooth out and come to a way where we come into a sustainable way in a humanist way with as few wars and as few atrocities. But like we already do have wars and atrocities. We shouldn't. We already have you know, catastrophic fires and things like that. We're having huge catastrophic loss of species diversity. So it's not like we might win. We've already lost some battles. But I think that it's a question about how good of a landing can we come to. We know the problem, we've got to solve it. And so to me, the sustainability is absolutely the biggest problem, but the crisis of digital governance is one of the things we've got to be able to solve before we can solve sustainability. So we've got to figure out whether we can have democratic governance cleanly and effectively in the digital age. And so that's the one I'm working on.
And the sort of AI for good movement, the idea that we use AI in order to achieve these goals, you know, like the United Nations sustainability goals. Are you behind that? Do you think we can use AI in that way? And those two are not equivalent. I totally believe we can use AI in a good way. Yes, that's certainly. I also believe we can use AI in a bad way. And now we get into ethics washing again. No amount of doing good things with AI justifies doing bad things with AI.
So yes, by all means, do all the good you can. That's great. But don't look the other way and say, oh, look, Microsoft's donated, $600 million, dollars to the homeless in Seattle. It's like, yeah, but that's how much the federal government used to give every city every year back when people paid taxes. So it's not a simple equation. Yes, we can definitely do good, and yes, we must do good. And basically everything we do, we're going to do with AI now. It's going to become ridiculous to say, it's like, I think there's people already saying things, again, people being clever about this, like it's saying AI for good. It's like saying, I don't know, like language for good or something. It's like we use that all the time. So I think that digital technology is ubiquitous now. It's one of the ways we solve problems. It's one of the things we write down stuff on.
The idea that all technologies are neutral and technology, AI is going to be as ubiquitous as language, right? That's what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, language is not, it's certainly not neutral. Again, that goes back to that bias paper, right? But language reflects the biases of our society, but nevertheless, by and large, I mean, we can dwell on the bad if we want to, and I think we need to address the bad. But by and large, we've been remarkably successful at our goals, and now we need to revise and update our goals now that we know more about what our current threats profile looks like.
Well, I think we're going to have to end it there because there is another Robotics Week event that started, and some people in the audience might want to go there. But it's been great talking to you, Joanna, and look forward to catching up with you in Germany or in England or online, maybe again, but
it's
soon,
more sustainable.
Hopefully. Yeah.
It's nice to see you guys
Absolutely.
again.
Take care. Bye-bye. See you again soon.